Peggy Lennon lived a double life for years, and no one knew, until now. I always thought Peggy Lennon lived one of the safest lives in show business. The smiling girl on the Lawrence Welk show, the perfect harmonies, the picture-perfect family. Then I discovered there was another life happening at the exact same time, one almost nobody watching television ever saw. And honestly, it changed the way I look at her forever. When Americans tuned into the Lawrence Welk show during the 1950s and 1960s, Peggy Lennon seemed almost frozen in time. Always smiling, always standing shoulder to shoulder with her sisters, always making harmony look effortless. But here's the part that fascinated me. While millions of viewers believed they knew Peggy Lennon, they really only knew half of her story. The woman on television and the woman at home were living two completely different lives. That's the double life no one talked about. I think that's why her story feels so different from so many Hollywood legends. It isn't about secret affairs or hidden scandals. It's about carrying enormous responsibility while making everything appear effortless. Peggy was only 14 years old when she first stepped onto national television on Christmas Eve in 1955. Can you imagine that? At 14, most kids worry about homework. Peggy suddenly found herself performing in front of millions of Americans. What's amazing is that none of this was carefully planned. Her family wasn't connected to Hollywood. They weren't entertainment insiders. They were a large Catholic family from Venice, California, where music was simply something everyone did together. Her father, William Lennon, taught his children harmony because he loved singing. Not because he expected fame. That small decision changed everything. One family performance led to an introduction. Lawrence Welk listened. Within days, Peggy and her sisters were appearing on one of America's biggest television programs. Just like that, childhood disappeared. But here's something I didn't know until much later. Even while America was falling in love with the Lennon sisters, life inside their home remained surprisingly ordinary. Money wasn't pouring in. In fact, despite becoming nationally famous, the sisters were still earning standard union wages for television performers. That surprised me. Imagine being recognized everywhere, yet still worrying about family finances. That's not how most people picture television fame. Behind the bright dresses and polished performances, Peggy was still part of a household with 12 children. Family always came first. And sometimes, life reminded them how fragile that family really was. Before television fame had even fully settled in, tragedy struck. Peggy's baby sister, Mary Frances, wandered into the street and was killed in an accident. Peggy was only 13. I honestly can't imagine carrying that kind of heartbreak into adolescence. The audience never saw it. The cameras certainly didn't. But grief had already become part of Peggy's life before America even knew her name. Years later, another enormous change arrived. One of her sisters married and stepped away from the group. Suddenly, the famous quartet became a trio. That sounds simple. It wasn't. Peggy's role became even more demanding. She wasn't usually the lead singer. She handled the difficult harmony lines, the notes most listeners never consciously noticed, but would absolutely miss if they disappeared. I've always admired people whose greatest contribution isn't obvious. Peggy became that person, the one quietly holding everything together. While audiences applauded the performance, she was making sure the performance worked. As the 1960s continued, something else happened that created yet another hidden life. Peggy married musician Dick Cathcart. Soon she was raising children, 6 of them. Think about that for a second. During the day, she could be recording albums, traveling, appearing on television, touring across America. Then she'd return home and become a wife and mother. Those were 2 full-time jobs. Yet she somehow managed both. That's the double life I keep coming back to. America saw the performer. Her family knew the mother. Neither role canceled out the other. Then came the moment that changed everything. Not professionally, personally. In August 1969, Peggy's father was murdered. Even writing those words feels shocking. William Lennon wasn't simply her father. He had guided the sisters from childhood, protected them, encouraged them. He had been there from the very beginning. The crime itself was almost unbelievable. The killer suffered from dangerous delusions and believed Peggy was somehow destined to marry him. Her father became the tragic target of that obsession. I had to stop reading for a moment when I learned that, because it's hard to imagine a family surviving something so senseless. Yet somehow, Peggy kept performing. That's incredible to me. Can you imagine stepping onto a brightly lit stage while carrying that kind of grief? The audience applauded. They smiled. The sisters smiled back. But inside, nothing was the same. Life moved on because it had to. The Lennon sisters left the Lawrence Welk show. They created new opportunities, performed with Jimmy Durante, worked alongside Andy Williams, eventually became regular stars in Las Vegas. From the outside, everything looked successful. Behind the scenes, Peggy was balancing constant travel with raising a growing family. I don't think people appreciated how exhausting that must have been. There weren't headlines celebrating mothers who quietly held everything together. There rarely are. Years later, another painful chapter arrived.